What began as routine late-night promotion unraveled into live TV chaos when Mark Wahlberg clashed with Jimmy Kimmel over a pointed joke, a confrontation that spiraled into a full-blown standoff, ultimately ending with security escorting the A-list actor off set. The studio audience had settled in expecting a familiar rhythm jokes, charm, and another Hollywood promo cycle. Wahlberg, a frequent guest on Jimmy Kimmel Live, was usually all Boston grit and easy banter. But from the moment he walked out, something felt off. Kimmel's monologue came laced with an unusual sharpness. When he introduced Wahlberg, the tone was unmistakable, smug-edged, and intentionally provocative. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mark Wahlberg, here to talk about his new movie, and hopefully not beat anyone up backstage. The crowd chuckled, but Wahlberg's smile tightened. He'd heard jokes about his troubled past before, but this one had teeth. Still, he took his seat with practiced calm. "So Mark, another action movie, huh?" Kimmel asked, leaning back with a smirk. "You're 53 now. When do you finally retire from pretending to be tough on screen?" Wahlberg's jaw clenched, barely visible. His reply came smooth but firm. "As long as audiences want to see authentic stories about real people overcoming real challenges, I'll keep making those films." Kimmel didn't let up. "Authentic stories," he echoed with mock sincerity. "Right. Because nothing says real like a millionaire from Dorchester pretending he still knows the streets." The studio went quiet. Even the band exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't late-night teasing. It was veering into something darker. Wahlberg leaned in, his voice low but steady. "I've never pretended to be anything I'm not. I've always been open about my past, the mistakes I made, and the work I've done to make things right." Kimmel's next line cut deep and deliberate. "Right. The redemption arc. Tell me, Mark, do you think your victims watch your movies and think, 'Great, the guy who blinded me is now worth $300 million. It was a brutal reference to Wahlberg's 1988 assault conviction. His publicist, watching from the green room, immediately reached for her phone. This was beyond late-night provocation. This was sabotage. Wahlberg's accent grew thicker, his Boston roots rising with his anger. "Jimmy, that's not just out of line, it's disgusting. I was 16. I served my time. I made direct amends to the people I hurt. And I've spent 35 years trying to become a better man." Kimmel leaned in, smirking. "Have you, though? Or did you just get rich enough that people stopped caring?" Silence. No laughter. No applause. Even the camera crew looked to the control booth for direction, unsure if they should cut to commercial. Wahlberg's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took to hold himself back. "You know what, Jimmy?" He stood, calm, deadly quiet. "I came here to talk about a movie that supports hundreds of families. A film about second chances. But instead, you want to dredge up the worst moment of my life for cheap applause." Kimmel's expression faltered, realizing, maybe too late, how far he'd pushed. "Hey, I'm just asking the questions people want answers to. Isn't that what journalism is?" The Wahlberg's voice snapped like a whippy. "Journalism. This isn't journalism. This is a hit job. And coming from a guy who built a career mocking people who can't defend themselves, that's rich." Security was now positioned just off stage. The tension was suffocating. Kimmel's face flushed red. He tried to maintain control. "Maybe we should take a break." "No," Wahlberg said. "Let's finish this." The lights felt hotter, the air heavier. Wahlberg remained standing, towering over the seated host. Kimmel fumbled with his cue cards but couldn't find a way out. "I think you're being a little sensitive," he tried. "This is comedy. If you can't handle a few jokes about your past, maybe you shouldn't be in Hollywood." A few audience members audibly gasped. Even the bandleader shook his head. Wahlberg's face froze. "Sensitive? Jimmy, let me explain sensitivity. I was a 16-year-old addict from a broken home. Angry, violent, lost. I hurt people, and I carry that guilt every single day. But what I don't need is some smug comedian behind $1 million Dollar desk telling me I haven't earned my place. Kimmel tried to interject. Weakly. Privileged. I worked my way up too. Wahlberg stepped closer, now nearly looming. No, Jimmy, I lived it. While you were making prank calls on radio, I was trying not to get jumped on the way to school. While you were chasing celebrity interviews, I was laying bricks at 4 a.m. to pay for acting classes. The audience was riveted, every word electric with emotion. This wasn't staged. This was real, raw, ugly, unfiltered. Two powerful men, colliding under the spotlight, one wielding sarcasm, the other wielding truth. Live television had never felt so uncomfortably human. Kimmel tried to diffuse the moment with a laugh, but the sound was thin, brittle, completely void of confidence. Come on, Mark. You're taking this way too seriously. We're entertainers, right? We both know how the game works. Wahlberg didn't move. His voice dropped into something low and dangerous. This isn't a game to me, Jimmy. My past isn't your punchline. The people I hurt, they weren't material for your monologue. And the work I've done to try to make it right isn't yours to mock. Under the glare of the studio lights, beads of sweat now visibly dotted Kimmel's brow. His writers in the booth were frantically gesturing, trying to signal a pivot or a break. But he couldn't look away. He was stuck in the moment, trapped across from a visibly enraged Wahlberg with no script to save him.
You know what's really funny, Jimmy?
Wahlberg continued, his voice gaining force. You spend every night joking about other people's lives, their failures, their pain. But when's the last time you put yourself on the line? When's the last time you risked anything that wasn't approved on a cue card? Kimmel's defenses flared, and he made the fatal mistake of pushing back. At least I never blinded someone in a racially motivated attack. The words hung in the air like poison. The entire room went still. It wasn't just cutting, it was cruel, specific, calculated, unforgivable. Even the camera operators froze, unsure if they were still supposed to roll. Wahlberg's body locked into stillness, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. For a beat, the audience collectively held its breath. Then, Wahlberg's voice came out icy and deliberate. Get up. Kimmel blinked. What? I said get up. Say that to my face. Not from behind your little desk. Say it like a man. Kimmel stayed seated. His usual bravado had evaporated. Mark, maybe we should just take a break. Stand UP. The force of Wahlberg's voice slammed through the room, causing several audience members to flinch. You want to dredge up the worst thing I ever did. You want to turn my deepest shame into cheap laughs. Then look me in the eye while you do it. Don't sit there hiding behind a desk you think makes you untouchable. Kimmel's hands gripped the edges of his desk, knuckles white. His security team hovered just off stage, unsure how to respond. The threat wasn't physical, but the confrontation was escalating fast. You know what your problem is, Jimmy? Wahlberg pressed. You've spent so many years hiding behind sarcasm. You've forgotten how to be real. You think being funny gives you permission to be cruel. You think your job justifies all of this. Kimmel's voice finally returned, but it was small, strained. I'm just doing my job, Mark. Wahlberg let out a laugh, bitter, humorless. No, your job is to entertain, to bring joy, not to tear people down for sport. You're supposed to make people feel better before they go to sleep, not disgusted by what they've just witnessed. A wave of murmurs rippled through the studio audience. The discomfort was now palpable. People shifted in their seats. Some were already reaching for their phones, capturing the moment in shaky videos. Liv tweeting what had become a total meltdown in real time. In the control booth, producers argued, cut to commercial, or let it play out. Kimmel finally stood, but his movements were unsteady. He looked small next to Wahlberg, who stood with the coiled presence of a man, barely holding himself back. You think you're better than me? Kimmel snapped, voice rising with a sharp, desperate edge. You think making some movies and donating some cash makes you a saint? that it erases what you did. Wahlberg didn't flinch. His anger had cooled into something harder, contempt. I never claimed to be better than anyone. But I do know the difference between owning your past and using other people's pain for content. I know the difference between accountability and exploitation. Kimmel's veneer cracked completely. Oh, spare me the philosophy, Mark. You're an actor. You say lines other people write. You play pretend for a living. Don't lecture me about being authentic. That landed badly. The insult to Wahlberg's profession, to his identity, was the final misstep. A few people in the front row stood and quietly began making their way out. The room had tipped. What had started as late night banter was now something far uglier. Wahlberg's tone dropped into eerie calm. You're right about one thing, Jimmy. I do play characters, but at least I admit it. You've been playing one for so long, you've forgotten who you really are. Under the makeup, under the script, under all the smug jokes. Kimmel's face flushed, red veins bulged at his temple. Get out, Mark. Just get out. Oh? Now you want me to leave, Wahlberg said, stepping forward. After you brought this all up. After you turned this into a public ambush. Now I'm supposed to quietly disappear, like some nobody who wandered into your little kingdom. Security moved in closer, poised at the edge of the stage, uncertain whether to intervene or let the verbal standoff burn itself out. And the whole world, it seemed, was watching. Wahlberg hadn't made a single threatening move. His anger was purely verbal. But that restraint only made his words more devastating. You invited me here tonight, Jimmy? Wahlberg said, his voice cutting clearly through the shocked silence of the studio. You asked me to come on your show, promote my work, give your audience something meaningful. But instead of doing your job as a host, you tried to tear me down. For sport. Kimmel sat frozen, breathing heavily, clearly unprepared for the intensity, now aimed squarely at him. I was just asking tough questions, he muttered defensively. That's what good interviewers do. Wahlberg let out a bitter laugh. Tough questions. Tough questions are about my work, my process, my choices as an actor and producer. What you did wasn't journalism. It was a personal ambush disguised as an interview. The room had gone dead quiet. Even the band had stopped playing, as if they too realized something much deeper than late. Night entertainment was happening here. You know what's really sad? Wahlberg's voice dropped to a near whisper, but somehow it carried through every inch of the studio. You're talented, Jimmy. You're funny when you want to be. You can be charming, engaging. But somewhere along the way, you decided cruelty was easier than creativity. Kimmel visibly flinched. This wasn't just criticism, this was a mirror being held up to him. His eyes welled slightly, not from rage, but from something harder to define. Pain, shame? Don't psychoanalyze me, Kimmel snapped, his voice cracking. You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. You're right, Wahlberg replied calmly. I don't. Because you hide. Behind jokes. Behind sarcasm. Behind that plastic grin. You never let anyone see who you really are. Me. I've made mistakes. I've owned them. I've stood in the fire and said, yeah, I screwed up. But I tried to make it right. The tension was no longer just uncomfortable. It was suffocating. This wasn't banter. This wasn't a performance. It was two men peeling back each other's defenses on live television. Suddenly, Kimmel slammed his palm down on the desk. The loud crack echoed like a gunshot. No, he barked. This is my show. These are my cameras, my studio, my audience. You don't get to come here and lecture me on how to do my job. A Wahlberg stepped back, not in fear, but in surprise. Then he said, almost softly, there it is. The real Jimmy Kimmel, not the comedian, not the host. Just an insecure bully who panics the moment someone calls him out. Kimmel's face turned from crimson to ghost white, as if all the blood had drained from it. He looked around desperately, for support from the band, the crew, the writers. But all he saw were uneasy eyes, averted glances, and subtle disappointment. You want to know what's really pathetic? Wahlberg continued, his voice now anchored in something deeper, something final. I came here tonight ready to be vulnerable, to talk about my past, my mistakes, the people I've hurt and how I've tried to fix what I broke. Because that's what it means to grow, to take accountability. Kimmel tried to speak, but no sound came out. He looked crushed, his trademark sarcasm nowhere to be found. The audience watched in stunned silence, and though no one said a word, the shift in sympathy was clear. Wahlberg slowly raised a hand, pointing at the host. But you, Jimmy, you saw that vulnerability as weakness. And that says more about you than it ever could about me. You took the worst moment of my life, Wahlberg said, voice steady but weighted, and tried to turn it into a punchline, all for a few cheap laughs in your monologue. The security team remained stationed nearby, but it was clear they wouldn't be needed. This wasn't heading toward physical violence. What was unfolding was something far worse for Jimmy Kimmel, the total and public dismantling of his professional reputation. And you know what the really sick part is? Wahlberg's voice rose, not with rage, but with crushing disappointment. These people came here tonight to laugh, to forget their problems for an hour. Instead, you gave them a masterclass in cruelty, in how to be a bully with a camera and a script. A few scattered claps broke out, then more. Within seconds, the audience was applauding, not the confrontation, but Wahlberg's poise, his restraint, his dignity. Kimmel finally found his voice, though it emerged barely above a whisper. Mark, I think maybe we got carried away here. No, Jimmy, Wahlberg replied sharply, shaking his head. You got carried away. I tried to keep this professional. I tried to steer us back. I gave you every opportunity to act like a decent human being, but you just kept doubling down, over and over. Kimmel glanced toward the control room, searching for a lifeline, but the producers looked as stunned and disgusted as everyone else. One was already on the phone, likely with Network XX, watching this debacle unfold live. I think we're done here, Wahlberg said, unclipping the small mic from his shirt. This isn't the kind of show I want to be associated with, and you're not the kind of person I want to work with. Mark. Wait, can't we just? No, Wahlberg cut in, voice final. We can't just anything. You made your choice tonight. You chose petty over professional, cruelty over respect. And now, you get to live with that. He handed the mic to a stunned sound tech and walked off stage. The audience erupted again, this time a full standing ovation. As Wahlberg reached the edge of the stage, he paused and turned back. You know, Jimmy, I really hope you learned something from this. Because if you didn't, you're going to find yourself very alone in this business, very quickly. Hollywood tolerates a lot, but it doesn't tolerate hosts who humiliate their guests for sport. And with that, Mark Wahlberg walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage. Kimmel remained frozen behind his desk, staring at the exit, visibly rattled. The studio fell into a thick, stunned silence. A beat later, the producers cut to commercial, but the damage had already been done. Clips of the exchange hit social media within minutes. Mark Wahlberg began trending instantly, as thousands praised his composure and called out Kimmel's behavior for what it was: unprofessional, mean, spirited, and calculated. Behind the scenes, chaos reigned. Executives scrambled into emergency meetings. Sponsors began pulling ads. Publicists started canceling appearances. Kimmel's stock was crashing in real time. Outside, Wahlberg was met by his publicist and security team. How do you feel? His publicist asked. Wahlberg didn't hesitate. Disappointed. I really thought we were better than this, as an industry. I thought we'd learned something about basic respect. Apparently not. What the audience had witnessed wasn't just a guest walking off a late-night set. It was a breaking point, a moment when someone said enough. When dignity refused to be a prop for cheap entertainment. By morning, it had become a watershed moment in late-night television, fueling national conversations about ethics, platform responsibility, and how we treat people in the public eye. Kimmel's reputation never fully recovered. Wahlberg's, it only soared. Proof that in an industry obsessed with image, there's still power in simply standing your ground.